Good afternoon, KWYP members. We are very excited to have Chris Bessette, an agent from the Orlando Market Center, to spend some time with us going over the Ignite session, Win the Seller. And he's going to be sharing his tips on how to go through this Ignite session. And if you guys have any questions during the webinar, please use the questions tab on the GoToWebinar panel and type your questions in, and we'll make sure to answer them at the end of the webinar. Thank you. And with that said, I'm going to hand it off to you, Chris.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ozzy, and thank you, everyone, for having me on today. Looking forward to sharing. Would love to have some questions to walk through at the end. So a little background about me. I've been teaching Ignite for a little over 3 years now. I first started teaching Ignite. What brought me to it, or how I got involved with it, was as an ALC member. We encourage, to teach in the market centers. I've been an ALC member for, this is my 6th year now. And so that's originally what got me involved in it. And then about 2014, I became a little bit more passionate about teaching after taking Train the Presenter and then Train the Presenter advanced workshops. So I've learned that teaching is definitely a passion of mine, so that's why I continue to teach. And also I'm interested in getting KWU certified as far as the teacher goes. So teaching is one of the next requirements that I have to do. So that's how I got started with it. Benefits. Why should we teach Ignite? And me purposely, why do I teach this section? I think it's a great opportunity to find new or emerging talent in your market center, to build your team. Of course, with your team leader's blessing to engage them, or if they engage you, make sure that you talk to your team leader. I'm sure each individual office has their own protocols. And then oftentimes, newer agents, they'll want assistance of seasoned agents. So it gives you the opportunity to kind of train and mentor, and also, by helping others, you may help yourself as well by co-brooking some deals. And, last but not least, how have I benefited? Well, as we know through MAPS and BOLD, one of the best ways to get to self-mastery is through teaching. That is the best way. So winning with sellers is something that I'm passionate about, as I'm very seller-focused in my business and my role. So, and honestly, my personal conversion rates and so forth have increased by teaching this section of Ignite, and I've actually implemented some of the material into my business, which I will share with you guys today. How do I organize the material? So I really do just kind of follow the course materials as provided for us, which I've got copies with me today. And one thing that you learn in Train the Presenter and Train the Presenter Advanced is there's sections where it's need to know, nice to know, and sections to learn on your own. So kind of what I'm going to hit on today with the limited amount of time we have is the need to know sections, or what I really do focus on. And then one of the other questions is provide some highlights or examples that include, and I'm definitely going to talk about that, sections that I think are great. So, okay, so some tips that I have before getting started in teaching anything. Prepare well beforehand. If you've not taught in the material, I would recommend that you get some agents in your market center, spouse. Even worst case scenario, do it in front of yourself, with yourself in front of the mirror. But it's best if you can get some feedback from other people, and because once you do it in real time, you'll realize where you maybe need to go shorter or go less deep on certain topics. So prepare well in advance, and best if you can get some outside feedback before actually getting into the class and teaching it. And then once you've taught the class a few times, the material is the same, you get a good gauge, and you'll have a better understanding of your time constraints. Definitely go through the material and decide what personal stories you're going to add. There's sections in the instructor manuals where we'll ask you for personal stories, and I'll talk about some of those today. But definitely have all that stuff figured out in advance so you're not just winging it. One thing that I do is I kind of add time marks to the bottom of the pages. So that way, as I'm going through the material, I kind of know where I need to be, when I need to be. So, if I'm, say, 30 pages in, and a half an hour into the presentation, and I should be 40 more pages further, then I know I kind of have to pick up the pace. And things will change depending on your audience. You'll have some classes where they'll have more questions, and other classes where they'll have less. So that's one tip that I do, is I kind of write the timestamps of where I should be on each individual page to make sure that I'm in track or behind pace there. Have lots of questions prepared. teaching anything, right? We know it should be 50-50. As adult learners, they like to learn, they like to talk, they like to get involved. So that's a lot of what I do, and tips that I'll provide today is questions that I ask that maybe you can implement into teaching your session. Um, Definitely arrive to class early. I like to get there about 15 minutes early if at all possible. That way you just make sure you're set up, you're comfortable. Specifically, it's in a room you're not taught in before. You want to get comfortable in your environment. And then also gives you the opportunity to kind of greet people as they come in, get to know them a little bit. Knowing your audience and kind of what they're looking for, I think just provides a better teaching experience for you as the instructor and then also for the students. I always ask who has reviewed the material. That gives me a good basis point of who's kind of involved and who's thinking beforehand, and maybe I can lean on them. If it's a quiet class, if there's someone that's already read the material, I can kind of engage them for questions to get the other people to warm up. And one thing that I'm doing in the introduction, I want to find out their knowledge, or how long they've been in the business. I know typically that Ignite students tend to be newer in the business. However, from time to time we do get experienced agents and maybe from other companies, and I want to know that because there's a good chance they've got some good input that I can learn from and the whole class can learn from. And then always asking what they're wanting to learn. So what are they expecting to get out of it, and make sure that you hit those highlights. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the material. So into that section of Ignite, I'm going to kind of start on page 11, which is get your head in the game for those of you that have the material. So there's an instructor note there that says, remind the participants that this week we're focused on getting seller leads and getting the appointment. So one thing that we very much focus on, and that my team leader and as agents, we just need to focus on getting the appointment, right? So we want to deflect the objections, answer them as quickly as possible, but really I want to stress that to the Ignite students, because the most important thing is them getting the appointment and getting in front of people. So I really hit hard on that and answer any questions that they have on objections that are causing them to not get the appointment, because ultimately we do want to get them in front of sellers. In this case is what we're teaching. That's really the first thing that I spend time on. I spend about 3 minutes on that, talking about that, and then asking some questions. Next page is page 12, where it says focus on listings. So really there I go to MREA, so the listings leads leverage model. At this point I'll always ask the class who has read The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, or who is currently reading it. A lot of times they'll just be reading it, maybe for the the ace of the class, they've already read it or they've been exposed to it prior to. But that's also what I want to know. And if they haven't heard that, then I spend a little time talking about the listings, leads, and leverage, because obviously that's a big focal point in MREA. So on that section, major benefits, provides more exposure, it brings more buyers, and then our time is leveraged. And I'll talk a little bit more about these as we get on into the material. So making it happen, going on to the next page, page 13, and working with sellers. We're going to talk about the pre-listing packet and then the listing presentation. So really what I'm focused on in this course is the severe importance of that pre-listing packet, the pre-qualification of them. It's something that it took me a while to learn in my career, to know to actually pre-qualify every single appointment, and I stress that a lot. Even with the ones that we know are sphere or referrals, or maybe it's even a past client, we still don't want to skip that step. It's very important to always pre-qualify. So I'm going to spend a lot of time on the pre-listing packet and pre-qualifying, and then getting into the listing presentation. So pre-qualifying the seller, it tests their motivation to sell, prepare for the listing appointment, insight into the mindset, and avoid wasting your time. So that first paragraph on the the pre-qualifying the seller, I'll have someone read that out loud, which is a good way to get the class engaged, to kind of get that 50-50 balance that we're looking for. So I'll ask someone in the class to read that section aloud and then highlight and underline what stands out to you. So for me in that paragraph, it's testing their motivation to sell, getting us prepared for the appointment, giving us insight into the mind of the seller, and avoid wasting time. Okay? Then the next page is going to be the pre-qualification script. So I have another one that I use. Ask all of these questions, which are great questions, obviously, and then I have some that I add that maybe you want to consider adding to your pre-qualification script or possibly when you're teaching the class. So we go through all of these, and I have individuals read the questions, and then I ask them, why would we ask that question, or what's important about that? So, the first question is, how did you hear about me? Most agents get it, that we want to understand why we ask that question is, where's our marketing dollars working, right? So most of them get that, but I want to make sure that they get each one of these questions, why they're important, because every single one of them is important, okay? So one of the questions that I asked that's not in the script are, what do you believe are good qualities in a real estate professional? Once again, what do you believe are good qualities in a real estate professional? And I asked the class, why do we ask that? And the reason why we ask that, it's going to give us insight into what the seller is looking for as far as in their agent. Most of the time, it's going to be honesty, good communication, and aggressive are typically going to be the answers I think you guys would agree that we hear. However, it's a great question to ask, because they may give us a different answer, and we may want to tailor our presentation to that. So that question was, what do you believe are good qualities in a real estate professional? Next, are you willing to offer any sort of seller financing, or do you prefer to get your cash out? Are you willing to offer any sort of seller financing, or do you prefer to get your cash out? Just a good question to know, especially on the higher end luxury homes. Sometimes that can help us put deals together. Have you ever considered selling the property yourself? I mean, we want to know that, right? If they're just bringing us out there to do the CMA for them, or if they're considering selling by owner, that's an objection we want to know up front. Most of the time it's no, but from time to time I do get that. So that's a question that I ask. And then a crucial one that I think is great is, please describe your home for me. And then just be quiet. So please describe your home for me. Obviously, we probably already have the address, and we can look up the tax records. Maybe it was in the MLS before. We can get an indication as to what the property looks like. But the reason why we're asking that question is it's a personality trait, right? So based on what they say there, we're going to have a better understanding if we're talking to a D, an I, an S, or a C, right? Based on the responses. I'm not going to go into detail into what each one says. When I do teach the class, I talk about that. This is where I ask a question: who knows what your disc is, who understands the disc, and then I always will have our training calendar in front of me, and we'll let them know when the next disc class is. But as new agents, they all take the disc in our market center. But that's a great question. Any improvements or upgrades? Any areas of concern or that need work? So improvements or upgrades, areas of concern that needs work. This is going to help us do our CMA, is why I add these. And then I'd like to send you a packet of information before we meet, which we're going to get into. The pre-listing packet is what we're going to get into next. And then the last question that I asked that's not in here is, if what I say makes sense and you feel comfortable and confident that I'm the right agent to get your house sold, are you prepared to hire me and sign the paperwork when we get together at blank at blank? If what I say makes sense and you feel comfortable and confident that I'm the right agent to get the property sold, are you prepared to hire me and sign the paperwork when we get together at blank, right? So we want to ask that. It gives us a real good indication as to their motivation, okay? So I think you guys can see, I mean, I've spent a lot of time there just on this webinar, and I spend a lot of time on that in the class, because I truly do think that I spend almost 20 minutes on that section when I'm teaching the class. That, I just was never taught to pre-qualify, and I just think it's so important before we go on any appointment to have that understanding and ask all those questions. So I do spend a lot of time there on the pre-qualifying. Okay, so now we're going to get to the pre-listing packet, which is on page 15. They were supposed to prepare this beforehand, so I asked them, who has a copy of it. Quite honest with you, most of the time they don't. They haven't done it yet, or they're working on it. So we just kind of walk through and make sure they understand how to do it and why they want to do it now, as opposed to waiting until they start, getting busy with deals. So just spend a little bit of time talking about, why would we send the pre-listing packet? And as it says there, we're pre-selling and we're saving time. And then I just kind of go through this. On the next section is page 16. It's all about the seller. So I kind of go through each section. Once again, I have them read. So like number 1, taking the time to understand your wants, needs, and expectations, answering your questions, returning phone calls and emails the same day, and being honest with you all the time, helping you obtain the highest possible price for your house in the shortest amount of time. So I have someone read these questions off, one of the Ignite attendees, And then we kind of go through and ask why each one is important and kind of really drive that home so they understand why we're doing, what we're doing. Okay? So then we move on. Obviously spend a little bit more time on that pre-listing packet, but for the sake of time, I want to get through all this material today. Getting ready to list. So it says here as the instructor, give them 2 minutes to read this page, lead a discussion on how these 5 factors affect the value of the property, ask the participant why each factor is important, and then explain that the only 2 that they can change are price and condition. The other things are recent sales, the location, and competition. We can't change those, right? And then just explain to them, because questions inevitably do come up, that, well, when are we going to talk about pricing? And that's the next section in Ignite that they go over, okay? So then talking about the price, I don't spend a lot of time on that because they do cover that in the next section of Ignite. However, I just do share that graph with them that's on page 18, that we really want to price it at market value. I've got it written in my notes somewhere that Diana Kokoska says that 80% of marketing is price, right? At the end of the day, we all know it comes down to price. So just really want to drive that home with them. And then once again, you guys will work on how to price, how to do a CMA the next day, okay? All right, so then we're moving on to page 19, getting ready to sell, condition. So just talk about, because a lot of people, especially newer agents, I find, they watch a lot of the shows, the DIY networks and house hunters, and I do not watch that stuff personally, so I don't really know. I don't really know what those. I know it's reality television, so I know it's not real. But I just really point out to them that curb appeal is very important, and then talking about staging, if those are services that they're going to offer as part of their value propositions. Okay. Then page 20, questions for the seller. This is a great form. This is one thing that I actually implemented into my business. We did something similar, but I kind of tweaked it a little bit based on teaching this class for the first time. So I have them go through, once again, I have someone read these questions, and then I'll ask them, how would you like to be communicated with? How frequently would you like an update? And I kind of talk to them, why is that important? And if they get stuck, as far as like the communication goes, some people younger, they don't want the phone call, they just want the text. Well, we want to know that because we want to communicate with them how they want to be communicated. And I just really stress that in talking with the agents. Okay, moving on. Next page is 21, about me. So this is the chance for them to do their resume. And I know we talk about this in another section, but one question I always ask them, because there's a section in there about experience, and I say now, because I've gotten a gauge for the room, right? So ask them, if you don't have a lot of experience or you're new to real estate, what could you say in this section? And I'm going to help them through this because I was a younger agent when I got started in my mid-20s. And one thing that I always said to clients is I would kind of nip that in the bud, the age thing, because I looked very young. So, I always tell them as a new agent, if that's an objection you're overcoming, it's better just to overcome it up front by saying, listen, I may not have a ton of experience because I've only been doing this for 6 months or a year, or whatever their level of experience may be. However, I am affiliated with the top the top company in the world now, and anything that I don't know the answer to, I will get the answer for you within an hour or whatever the time frame is that they want to give them. And then I also just say, because I am new, I'm going to work extremely hard for you. I've got a lot of great resources, and just really drive that home. And so I help them kind of figure out, if they don't have the experience, what can they lean on? Obviously, market center stats, the team, all the stuff that your team leaders are probably already referring to. Okay. So we've done all that. We've got the pre-qualifying, pre-listing. So now we're at the appointment. So I'm now on page 23 in the material. So greet. So a big thing that I stress is being on time. Don't know about you guys, but punctuality is a big thing for me. It is for most drivers. And someone being late, it's just like they don't care about me, or they don't care about my time. Their time's more important. So I really stress that importance of being on time. Being that I am in Orlando, we do have a lot of traffic here. So I just kind of tell them, if you're running late, or if there's an accident and it's really bad and you weren't prepared for it, you didn't leave 2 hours early because there's an hour delay on the interstate, what do you say? And I just kind of let them know you need to reach out beforehand, let them know that you're running late. Just kind of give them tips and really stress that importance of being on time, because we know that if you're late, it's very rude, right? So talk to them about walking through the home, with them or without them. So I kind of bring in the bold script there. For those of you that have not taken bold, there's a script in the listing presentation that I'm going to walk through your house so I can see it through the eyes of a buyer. When you decide to list with me, then you can take me through your house and show me all the features and benefits that really sold it for you so that I can help sell it to the buyers. So I really encourage them to walk through it on their own and utilize that bold script that we have. Unless it's maybe something where they don't have any rapport yet, then maybe you do consider taking that time to walk through the house with them. But I kind of talk about the pros and cons of both options. Then the listing presentation, which we're going to get into a little bit meat and potatoes here. But as far as the greeting, entering the home, and other items that they can ask for prior to. So I always ask here, what are some other items that we could have asked for the seller to have prepared for us that we talk when we greet them at the home? Some other things are that we give, the CMA that we could have sent them beforehand. Having the seller disclosures filled out. I'm a big proponent of that in the pre-listing packet. If they have a floor plan, asking for the sellers to have that ready for us. If they have a survey, asking the sellers to have that ready for us. List of improvements. And then depending on what you want to do in your pre-listing packet, have a purchase and sale agreement, already kind of like a 123 Main Street generic one filled out so that you can get them comfortable with what that looks like. Those are just some other items that I think you could include in the pre-listing packet and talk about the pros and cons of that. Okay? So number 2, we're walking through the home, and once again, I talked about with or without them, right? Kind of give you that script. Number 3, the listing presentation. So they have that, and we're going to go through kind of some of this. I talk about what I bring. Mine is not fancy, so I want to share with them. I think the more paperwork you have, the longer it makes the presentation. I don't think a lot of the sellers want that paperwork. So I tell them literally what I bring, and what I bring is I bring my comps on the iPad, so we go through those if I have not chosen to do it in my pre-listing packet. And then really other than that, I kind of have some market statistics, my pre-listing book. Other than that, I don't have a lot of stuff. So I talk to them about really what I take, and I will actually physically show them one of my folders that either I have coming up, my listing presentation folder that I take with me, or one that I've recently taken in the past, so they can see what I use, kind of give them a real world example. In there's a note for the instructors it's a great time to share a story about your first listing, or ask a participant who has taken a listing to share their story. So I will always ask participants who's taken a listing so far. And most of the time, none of them have, but it's a great question to ask. If nobody has, and I tell them about my first time, and I don't know about you that are on here, I was extremely nervous. I'd worked with some buyers, never met with the seller, had no idea what I was doing, wasn't really trained at my previous company, so I was really just winging it. And I talk about that I went in and I motivated myself and I came in high energy, and I truly think that's the reason why I got it. I got it over a couple seasoned agents. I believe I got it because of my energy level, and Diana talks about that a lot, is he or she who has the most energy wins, right? So I just encourage them. You're going to be nervous, and that's a good thing. Being nervous is it's a good thing. It's showing you that you're getting out of your comfort zone. So I share that story. I go into a little more detail. So that's one that I would say as presenters, you guys want to have that, if you can remember that first presentation. And the more vulnerable I think you can be with them, the more reassuring it is that they know that they're not the only ones that are nervous. So I would really encourage you to be vulnerable there. Okay? And then I also talk about, and there's a section there on some wording there on the bottom of page 25, you may use your version of scripts as a guide until you have it memorized. I encourage them, bring your bold listing presentation with you. It's okay to have it with you. Of course, you don't want to just be reading from it the whole time, but it's kind of like notes that you have when we go to see a doctor or an attorney or a CPA. They have something. It's usually an iPad or some sort of tablet now, but back in the day, they used to have like a little clipboard with notes that they took, and that's a good place for your script. So I encourage them to bring that kind of as a crutch so that they have something to reference in case they do get kind of caught up a little bit. Okay? All right, so then this is kind of the nice to know section. So I kind of fly through, because the entire seller listing presentation, 42 pages, has been included in this training module to go through page by page. Participants were asked in their pre-work mission to bring a copy of this. They can use this copy to make notes as you review each page. So I don't spend a lot of time on this. On certain pages I will, and I'll tell you where I guys do, but this is kind of a section that I kind of move through quickly because there's a lot of material in this section. And to do this in an hour and a half, there's just some things you kind of have to go through quickly. So page 29, that's where the goals for today. I like the bold script, or I have 3 goals. For those of you who don't know it, you should take bold. But you have 3 goals today. Decide on a price that's going to cause it to sell. You're going to choose today whether you choose to hire me, and I'm going to choose whether I choose to take your listing. And the one is not the price. It's answer any questions that you may have is number 2. So I got those a little messed up. But the one on this sheet is discuss your motivation for selling. Define your 10+ experience expectations, which we'll go through. Review what you can expect from Keller Williams and me. Explain the selling process. Review the 3 factors that get your house sold, and decide whether we're going to work together. So I encourage them to do that because more than likely they have not taken bold yet. So I'll kind of give them the bold script and then let them decide. Page 30. So some rules of communication. Ask lots of questions. So I encourage them to do that, right? We want to be 50-50, right? 50% questions, 50% us talking in our listing presentation. So listen more than we talk. Affirm their responses with great, that's wonderful, yes. Of course, I tell them with the positive affirmations. If someone says, I'm moving because I got forced in this job transfer and we're really happy here and we don't want to move, but I'm being forced by my company to move to blah, blah, blah. Don't say, well, that's great, because it's not great. They just told you they're not happy about it. So obviously take that stuff with a grain of salt, okay? Then skip. So the next section I go to and spend a little bit of time on page 34. That's where it talks about why Keller Williams Realty. So I talk about the selling points of that, which we've kind of hit on. But there's a lot of new agents that don't have experience, right? So they need to rely on the company for that kind of experience, that bridging of the gap. So I spend time talking about that. Number 1 in the world, number 1 training company, best mobile property search, hundreds of real estate. As our market center, we talk about the lore reports, the language of real estate. I encourage them to incorporate that until they get their own statistics. So I do spend some time there because most often, they don't have a lot of experience. Okay. Then the next page that I really spend some time on is what if we don't have experience? So this is page 39, page 13 of the listing presentation. What if you don't have experience? I kind of bring that up again, okay? Marketing, talk about what we do to sell houses. So I tell them what I do personally in my marketing plan and what we do as an office so that they know. For instance, our ALC chose several years ago that as a market center, we were going to pay for enhanced listings on Realtor.com. I share that with them because they may not know what that means. They may have forgotten about it when they got hired on. So I talk about how important that is. So I go with some certain things that I do personally, then also what our market center does. And if anyone has been on a listing, what do they do differently to market houses? So once again, we just want to be really, really question-based, which is what I attempt to be. So doing this webinar where I just talk for 30 to 45 minutes is a little odd for me. I want to ask you guys questions. So it'd be great to get some questions for you guys. I'm getting close to the end here, so any questions that you have, definitely want to open it up. So now we're on page 45 of the material, a smooth closing. I always encourage them to bring a net sheet. That's one of the biggest things people want to talk about on a listing appointment, right? Is price. What are you going to do to sell my house, and what's the financial equation to it? So always have that net sheet with you. Explain where they can get that. We have certain title company affiliates that we work with that have apps and so forth, so I just make sure that they understand what those resources are, and then I encourage them to go to one of our title company training classes so that they understand what those costs are if they don't already know. Okay, moving on. So I spent a little bit of time on page 47, the 3 factors that get your house sold: the condition, the marketing, and then the price. And obviously the big key point I'm attempting to drive home here is the price. It's all about the price. Like Diana says, 80% of marketing is price. And then talk to them if they're going to offer staging and kind of what that looks like, because I do often get questions around that. Do you do staging? And so I address that there. So on the condition, one thing that I always ask them on page 48 is a great question to ask sellers is, do you want to put money into the house or do you prefer to sell it as is? I know that I've earned competitive listing appointments in the past because the people, they didn't want to put money into it. They didn't want to do any work. They were more than happy to set a lower price and sell it as is. So I think that's a great question to ask, to them, especially if it's a property where it may need some work. Don't just assume that they want to do that. You may turn them off. So I always encourage them to ask that question at this point on condition. Page 49, great condition sells. Okay, another big thing where I spend a lot of time on is on page 51, the marketing of your house. And what I'm really attempting to make sure that is most important to these new agents is the communication that they have with the sellers. Typically, the biggest complaint that we're going to get in our industry is the lack of communication or the lack of aggressiveness. And honestly, I hear the communication the most. I mean, I think it's a reason why 84% of sellers will hire the same agent, but only 16% do, because the agents don't stay in communication. So I just encourage them that's really the biggest thing. And I do work expireds, and that's the biggest complaint I hear is that I never heard from the last agent. So set that expectation up front of what that's going to look like. On my team, we don't give them feedback after every single showing. As a new agent, maybe that's something that you want to provide. Maybe that's a value proposition there. So just talk about the pros and cons of that, but really drive home on how important it is to give that consistent communication, because the sellers want it. Quite honestly, they deserve it. So just really, really charging that home with them. Okay. All right. So all this other stuff is kind of nice to know. I think really the last thing, then he goes over the CMA, that I really spend a lot of time on is when we get to the objections. So on page 60, it starts giving you some objections there. And I just really talk about, some objection handling, and I get into it a little bit more. I know there's a few more pages down here where we'll get into the objections. Page 63 is the seller's disclosure document. Always just really encourage them to get that filled out first. In the state of Florida here, it takes them about 15 to 20 minutes to fill that out, and it's just really boring. You're sitting there staring at them filling it out. So I really encourage them to get that filled out. There's lots of great materials in here that I encourage them. It's kind of one of those sections where it's nice to know, so on your own. And then there's a section here where I would like to get to at one point, where it has them break up into groups of 2 and take 15 minutes practicing the listing presentation. Then they will switch. I've never had enough time allotted that I could do that. That is something that I would like to do. Me as a learner, when I take courses through KW, I want to do the activities. So it's something I'm going to work on implementing and actually getting them to practice their presentation. Even if they've never done it, what a better place to start than right there. So I encourage them at that time as well to start practicing together and explain the most importance of the practice and role play. I give the examples of how much a professional athlete practices before they actually go into the game, or how much an actor or an actress practices and rehearses their lines and scenes before they go on camera. So I really dial that in, how important it is to do that practice and role play. And then lastly, where I do spend a lot of time is on the objections. So on page 70, they've got some objections there where we're just not sure yet. Your commission seems high. We'd like to sleep on it. We're interviewing other agents before we make a decision. How long have you been in the business? So those are some good objection handlers, and I go through each and every one of those and spend some time with them. First I ask them, what would you say if this came up to you, or who has an answer if I said, your commission seems high. Who's got an objection handler? And then I go through a couple of the different bold and maps objection handlers with them. And then what I'm really attempting to drive home on the objections is you want to isolate the objection, right? So we're taught that. We need to isolate the objection. So if we get, they go for the close, and I really teach them, you want to be closing. You want to get that agreement there, because chances if you don't get it signed there, you're not going to get signed ever. In my personal experience, if they don't sign while I'm at the appointment, I have about a 20 to 22% chance that I'm actually going to earn that listing from when I leave the house. So I'm giving them those stats and driving that home, that's very important to them. So in teaching them to isolate it. So great, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we seem to be in agreement here. I'd like to go to work with you. And the Mr. and Mrs. Seller says, well, your commission seems high. So isolate the objection. So other than my commission being a little bit seeming to be too high, is there any other reason that's stopping you from signing the paperwork today? No, just that. So if we can agree on a commission percentage that works for you and get your household ready to list with me tonight, great. And then, teach them how to handle that objection, but really isolating it. And then I do spend time on each and every one of these. We're interviewing other agents before we make a decision. Talk about that. And I think I may have missed that actually in my pre-qual, is are you interviewing any other agents during this? And if so, may I have their names and numbers? So that's a question we want to know up front, because if we don't know that up front and they say that, that's a difficult one to overcome if you're kind of blindsided by that. So I do spend a lot of time on those objection handlers. And then the rest of it's really just putting it all together. Your turn, preparing for the class, the actions. And then what I always do is from the AHAs to Achievement, page 75, have the participants fill in their AHAs individually or brainstorm as a group. And so always what I end any class with that I teach is I ask, depending on the size, at a minimum I want 3 AHAs. If it's a larger class, say 10, 15 plus, then I want, maybe a few more AHAs than that. But we always want to get those AHAs, because chances are what someone's AHA is, maybe that person missed it or they were taking notes and it was a really good nugget and they'll want to write that down. So always in the class with AHAs. And then I also go through and individually ask them what their action steps are, because we do want to make sure and get them into action. So from this course, from the hour and a half that we just spent together today, what do you intend to get done, before I see you again in the Market Center, or when do you intend to give them a little bit of accountability? And most of the time, they honestly don't have the pre-listing packet done. So that's one thing that I encourage them to get done, because it is very important and helps us save time. So with that, I think we have about 8 minutes left according to my clock. And I am open for questions should anybody have any at this time.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chris. You had mentioned earlier communication being one of the top things that sellers complained about. What's one tip that you can give a new agent in regards to communicating with the seller?
Great. That's a great question, Ozzy. So there's in the packet, in our material in here, there's that questionnaire where it's like, how would you like to be communicated? So that's one tip, is find out how, their preferred method, and then how often. So we want to find out that expectation up front. If someone, and there are sellers out there that they may say, well, every time my house is shown, I expect feedback within an hour. That's something that's good to know, because you may not be able to deliver on that. So, and that could become a headache down the road. So really just setting that expectation. So just determine it with the seller and then get it in writing is what I would also encourage. So we typically, on our team, we will give our seller updates, attempt to get all showing feedback on Mondays over to them via email, but every Thursday they're going to get a phone call. That's our standard. That's when we choose to do it. But I think at a minimum you need to be calling them, or whatever their preferred method is, whether it's text or email, but just touching them once a week, but really setting that expectation and then getting it in writing. So with the communication, just having that open dialogue and communication to make sure that you can meet their standards. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that. Um, on the teaching side of things, how long were you an agent before you started teaching Ignite? Because for those KWYP members who might be new in the real estate industry, should they feel intimidated if they want to jump right in and begin teaching Ignite, shadow somebody who's been teaching it? What's your experience on that?
Yeah, so I was with another company for quite a while, doing the math here. I started teaching really in about 14. So I was an agent for about 7 years before I started teaching at night. However, no, I would not wait. I mean, just get in it and start teaching it. I mean, through the 6 personal perspectives, through MREA, we're told that the highest level of self-mastery is through teaching. And I would just get right into it. And so if you've not taken the Ignite class, or maybe if you've taken it a while ago and you're maybe you're in your second year, They've changed the material, so maybe go and take a session with someone that's teaching it, or maybe even go to another market center. But I would encourage you to start teaching it, because I can tell you, just even through going through the materials, there's certain things that I have added that have helped me in my personal business. And then just that teaching, it's just that the continuous repetition, it is the best way. And the selfish reason why I teach, I mean, I really do like to give back is the main reason why I do it, but selfishly, it helps you improve by teaching. I mean, even doing this webinar, has helped me in one way or another. It's given me something in my head that subconsciously is in there. So yeah, I would just get in there and start teaching. There's lots of opportunities, and you're going to be, we're taught so much about gratitude at this great company that we work for, and just pour into them, because even if you're worried, like, maybe you've only been on 2 or 3 listing appointments. Well, chances are that's 2 or 3 more than the people that are in that room. And your perspective, it may even be better for them than someone of like myself that's been doing a lot longer. So don't let, maybe if you don't have as much experience as I do, hold you back, because you may, resonate with the class even more. Yeah.
Wonderful. That was great advice. Thank you so much for your time, Chris. Those were all the questions that we received this afternoon.
Okay,
I
great.
really appreciate your time and spending it with our KWYP members. And I just want to let everyone know, if you have any questions regarding this Ignite session we had with Chris, we can keep the conversation going on the KWYP website. And this recording will also be posted on the website for your review. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ozzy. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.